It's attorney Greg Krasovsky, and this video is about how my lawsuit handle Remdesivir-related claims. First of all, if you've suffered any injuries, complications as a result of or subsequent to being administered Remdesivir, you have our sincere sympathies. If you've lost a loved one, a family member, a friend who succumbed to COVID-19 after being administered remdesivir or to other complications like pneumonia and a ventilator-acquired pneumonia, then please accept our sincere condolences. May the deceased rest in peace. This is the reason why my losses are handling remdesivir claims. I honestly and sincerely believe that probably 90% of COVID-19 deaths were preventable deaths and were caused by failure to properly give people early treatment, known effective early treatments, and then subsequent to their hospitalization after not being given any effective early treatment, to improper treatment. I'm not a physician, I'm an attorney. I do have some medical background, but I do a lot of research, and first and foremost, I consult with experts in this field to make sure that my conclusions are the conclusions that they've reached based on their treatment of patients, based on their understanding of the science and the clinical work involved and the research. So let's start from the get-go. People who call my offices have two types of remdesivir-related claims. First would be a potential product liability claim against the drug manufacturer, Gilead Pharmaceuticals. In order to have a viable, strong claim against a drug manufacturer with a high likelihood of success, we need to show, for instance, that the drug manufacturer did not adequately and accurately disclose known side effects on the warning label. This is the warning label that would have been distributed after Gilead Pharmaceuticals received emergency use authorization for the drug, or the warning label that Gilead Pharmaceuticals received for Remdesivir when it received FDA approval, regular FDA approval. So what's inadequate and inaccurate disclosure of known side effects? If you don't disclose the magnitude of the side effects, in other words, percentage of patients that get them and the complications, and you also don't disclose the severity. What are serious side effects? Side effects that can be fatal. Cancer, heart cardiac damage that will lead to your heart stopping, heart attack, right, or atrial fibrillation, things that lead to cardiac arrest, and then clinical death, and then biological death. Also, damage to your liver, damage to your kidneys. These are the organs that have to filter out toxins in your body. If you have a severe respiratory tract infection, like a severe case of the flu, COVID-19, trust me, you want to have a fully functioning liver and kidneys to filter out all the toxins that are building up in your body as your body fights the infection. So if the drug manufacturer didn't accurately disclose these side effects that have been scientifically and statistically proven and proven by scientists, pharmacologists, doctors, researchers, statistically proven with thousands of cases. If the drug manufacturer didn't disclose that accurately, then we could have a case. We would also have a case if the drug manufacturer intentionally, I'm not talking about negligence or recklessness, but intentionally withheld information on complications, or misrepresented the effectiveness of the drug. In other words, when a drug manufacturer like Gilead applied for either emergency use authorization or regular FDA approval, they intentionally overstated the effectiveness of remdesivir, or they intentionally understated the severity and the prevalence, the commonality of side effects. One of the side effects involved is fluid buildup in the lungs that was caused by renal damage from remdesivir. Now imagine you pick up COVID-19 infection and the virus starts to immediately replicate, not just in your upper respiratory tract, but in your lungs. A little bit in your intestinal tract as well, homes on the ACE2 receptors and starts to replicate. And it takes your body probably about 6 days, if you're a healthy person, to mount an effective immune response. In other words, to create effective sterilizing antibodies that will be able to envelop and kill the virus. In the meantime, the virus is entering your cells because you're not taking any drugs that would prevent the virus from binding to your cell membranes, nor are you taking any drugs that would interfere with the replication of the virus within your cells. For instance, like zinc, known to interfere with RNA polymerase, right? That the virus uses to multiply inside the cell. You have to get the zinc inside the cell, and for that, you need an effective zinc ionophore. In other words, a compound that would help the zinc since it has a different charge than your cell member would get in there. And the most effective zinc ionophores that I know of, or scientists talk about, are, surprise, surprise, a malaria drug known as hydroxychloroquine. Right? It doesn't treat COVID itself, although it does have some anti-inflammatory qualities, right? So helps you with inflammation. But if you have sufficient zinc in you, it helps to get the zinc inside the cells and slow down viral replication once the virus is inside the cell. Another effective zinc ionophore is cortisone and dihydrocortisone. I'm familiar with these compounds because I used to have a biotech company that worked on these compounds. So why wasn't anyone advocating for early treatment using those drugs? Oh, yes, there was a guy, Dr. Zelenko, may he rest in peace. He talked about using zinc and hydroxychloroquine as early treatment and also giving people antibiotics to prevent secondary pneumonia, such as azithromycin. ZMax, fairly effective, fairly safe antibiotic that people take all the time, for instance, for strep throat. So what's more dangerous, right? Azithromycin complications or succumbing to pneumonia as a consequence of having COVID-19 that's not being treated. But anyway, so you go into the hospital without any early treatment that I've described, without taking any additional vitamins, things like that, or rinsing your nose with iodine, with a nasal rinse that has some iodine in it, which apparently also helps to kill the COVID-19 virus. So I'm just telling you things that I've learned about. I'm not giving anyone medical advice. And all our claimants that have contacted my office say the same thing. We went in, they either lied to us about giving remdesivir because some people already knew that they didn't want remdesivir and said, don't give us remdesivir. So no, we won't. And they still gave it to them. Or they would tell the patient, if the patient was conscious and alert and oriented enough to be able to make an informed decision, or his loved ones, that this is standard protocol. This is part of our protocol. We have to give it to you. Well, I don't think anyone has ever outlawed, and I mean outlawed, made illegal, the patient's right and the doctor's obligation to obtain the patient's fully informed consent before rendering any treatment, including prescription drug treatment. So when you go into a hospital and they want to give you a drug because they believe it's an effective and a safe way to treat the pathology that you have, the illness that you have, the doctor's obligation is to pull out the FDA warning label or the emergency use authorization and say, Jim, here's the drug that I want to give you. By the way, these are the severe complications listed. Here they are. Are you okay with taking this risk? That's what's called properly obtaining your patient's fully informed consent. And if the patient, being now fully informed of the pros and the cons of the drug, says, yes, I'm good with it, then you can proceed to treating that person. If the patient comes in already, semi-conscious because they're not getting enough oxygen, because they haven't gotten any early treatment at home, then you have to provide that opportunity to their loved ones. 99% of cases that come to my office, the physicians have failed to do that. But that's the second part of the remdesivir-related claims, the medical malpractice claims. We'll get to those in a second. To finish up the potential claims against the drug manufacturer, here's what I believe. I suspect that Gilead Pharmaceuticals intentionally misrepresented the effectiveness or overstated the effectiveness of remdesivir against COVID-19. Remember, remdesivir wasn't that effective against Ebola. So I suspect there may have been intentional misrepresentation. For that, we need evidence, right? Otherwise, this is just an allegation. And hopefully, we will gather that evidence, both scientific evidence, statistical evidence, documentary evidence, if we get records like this to confirm it, and even perhaps eyewitness testimony of people who were in the loop and who can confirm that there may have been an intentional misrepresentation, intentional overstatement of the drug's effectiveness. I also suspect that the drug manufacturer, Gilead Pharmaceuticals, and this is just me, this is other attorneys I know and work with on remdesivir cases, that Gilead Pharmaceuticals understated the severity and the prevalence of side effects, including the renal injury. And we'll get to that in a second. So once we build enough evidence against Gilead Pharmaceuticals, we hope to be able to press a product liability claim, even if 5 or 10 years pass, because then we'll argue that the statute of limitations to start to tick, start to toll from the moment that these irregularities, that these violations or intentional misdeeds were discovered and proven, established by evidence, documentary evidence, statistical, scientific evidence, and witness testimony, including potential whistleblowers. So what I encourage everyone to do is work with my law office. Let's gather your medical records. Let's gather your pharmacy printouts. Let's gather your health insurance statements, the detailed monthly statements that'll show who is billing for what types of treatment. Because there was also a financial incentive involved that we'll talk to a little bit later. And let's see if we can get justice for the pain and suffering that you've endured if you're still alive after being given a remdesivir yourself. Or let's get justice for the loved ones that succumbed to COVID-19 and its complications after being administered remdesivir. I think on cases like this, because remember, when it comes to someone having a wrongful death, what does this mean? That someone basically was killed wrongfully out of negligence or recklessness, right? Intentional killing is homicide. But here we can have someone being killed as a result of a drug manufacturer's negligence or as a result of medical malpractice. And if we have a wrongful death claim, let's make sure we get justice for the patient. Another reason is, look, if the pharmaceutical and the medical establishment, the political establishment that authorized all this, get away with it once, guess what? They'll do it again, and they'll probably do worse. But anyway, moving on to the medical malpractice part. So you've gone into a hospital with COVID-19, and you were told that your loved ones that remdesivir-19 is it's protocol. We have to give it to you. People are giving remdesivir. I'm sorry, now for COVID-19, you're giving remdesivir. So you administered remdesivir, and you start getting fluid buildup in the lungs. By the way, a doctor, once they prescribe a drug to you, regardless whether they obtained your fully informed consent, something I talked about earlier, they have an obligation, absolute obligation, to monitor you for known side effects. Renal injury was a known side effect, even though it was understated, perhaps, in the drug label. Just like potential liver damage, potential cardiac damage. So the doctor has a duty to monitor for those, even if you're going to administer remdesivir just for 5 days. Well, what would happen? Doctors would notice fluid buildup. Say, oh, fluid buildup too much. Oh, person's probably getting too many fluids. Let's reduce the fluid intake. So no more fluids for the patient by IV, no more water, no more food even, because Food also has water, good percentage of water. And that's not helping someone because you need fluids when you're sick to help clear out the toxins, to fight the infection effectively with your own immune system. But now you're deprived of fluids, but the fluid buildup isn't going anywhere. Why? Because it's not being caused by excess fluid intake, it's being caused by a side effect of remdesivir, injuring your kidneys. Patient doesn't improve. Think of it. You've got fluid in the lungs. You have COVID-19 virus actively replicating in your lungs. And of course, now you start to have secondary bacterial infections in your lungs. Most healthy people have bacteria in their lungs. Maybe a little bit of streptococcus, a little bit of staphylococcus, even perhaps pneumococcus. But our immune systems are able to control them if you're healthy, right? Things go downhill once your immune system is weakened and compromised, or you have enough dead tissue within your lungs, right? And we know what the spike protein, COVID-19 spike protein did to cells, right? If you get enough dead tissue in there, then you're going to have an ideal environment for pneumonia, bacterial pneumonia. Or you can also have pneumonia caused by microplasma. So things get worse, and then patients would be put on ventilators. There's no choice. They put you on a ventilator to help you with breathing. But the ventilator is helping you breathe. Is it really helping with oxygenation? Right? With getting oxygen into your blood? Because such a high percentage of your lungs are out of commission, of your lung tissue is out of commission. To be able to have an effective transfer of oxygen to your blood? No. Patient is still going downhill. But remember, once you're put on a ventilator, you have to be kept unconscious. Otherwise, if you're conscious on the ventilator, you're going to pull it out. It's uncomfortable. It'll make give you a throw up reflex. You're going to try to pull out that tube. So you're given sedatives, right? You're given almost anesthesia. Some patients were even given strong cocktails containing morphine, containing even some fentanyl, just to keep them unconscious. When you're heavily sedated, it also, I think, suppresses your immune system. That's what I've been told. So things weren't being helped either. And you have this downward spiral where the patient's immune system was reduced even further, even though 6 days had passed and the body should be able to produce sterilizing antibodies in sufficient quantities. But your immune system is now weakened because it's fighting pneumonia. Plus, it's suppressed by sedatives. And patients went downhill, and then they had to be put on ECMO machines if those were available. These are machines that oxygenate your blood outside your body, like artificial lungs, pretty much, right? But that's not going to resolve the damage to your lungs or to help your lungs clear the virus. From what I've been told by physicians, the only effective remedy at that point, if people had 20, 30, 40, 50% of their lung tissue affected, was ivermectin, the anti-parasitic drug that saved billions of people in Africa and can even be given to kids for pinworm. I take the risk. I take ivermectin. Well, I have taken ivermectin for COVID and did quite well. I'm not complaining about it. I've also taken zinc with hydroxychloroquine when I had COVID-19. Worked quite well. No complications. But this is my own anecdotal evidence, and I'm no position to give people medical advice. But if you talk to physicians, effective, smart, non-biased, frontline physicians who are not afraid to tell the truth, this is what they tell us. So when it comes to remdesivir, what we're going to do is we're going to, just like with the product liability claim, ask you to provide us your medical records, pharmacy printouts, your health insurance records, to see if we can get evidence of medical malpractice. And medical malpractice is when a physician doesn't adhere to the generally accepted standards of medical practice as they're applied locally. So you have standards of medical practice that are established in medical schools, by medical boards, basically by the medical community. And the physician has to adhere to those. One standards of practice is that I've told you, right? You meet a patient, you're supposed to properly diagnose them. Once you've made the proper diagnosis, you're supposed to select a safe and effective treatment. If it's prescription drug treatment, pick a drug that's safe and effective, including, based on factors in the patient's medical history and other drugs that they're on. So you don't have negative drug interactions. So you don't have complications with a patient's prior medical history. So the patient already has a history of kidney damage, liver damage, reduced kidney function, liver function, history of cardiac problems. Well, maybe you shouldn't give them a drug that can exacerbate those conditions, right? Then, once you've selected the drug that you believe is the safest and the most effective, you're supposed to obtain the patient's fully informed consent by providing the patient with the pros and the cons, including all the known side effects and complications. Well, when we say known, officially known as they're listed on the warning label, right, or the emergency use authorization label, or the regular FDA warning label. And if the patient agrees, or their loved ones agree for, and people have medical authority because the patient is unable and not alert and oriented to give, uh, you know, proper legal consent, then you as a physician have a duty to monitor the patient for the development for any signs of known side effects and complications. So if you've put someone on remdesivir, you as a physician have an obligation to monitor the patient, even if you put them on it for just 5 days, for the development of any renal impairment, kidney impairment that would lead and result in fluid buildup in the lungs. You would monitor the patient for any liver damage or liver function, right? Reduced liver function, do blood tests, things like that, ultrasounds. And you would also have to monitor the patient for any potential cardiac side effects or complications. And as we know, people who had COVID-19 could have already had heart damage, for instance, from myocarditis. But myocarditis, we'll discuss that in detail in our COVID-19 vaccine video. So this is what we're going to be looking for signs of medical malpractice. If the physicians didn't properly monitor the patient, that means they weren't able then to immediately take all the necessary remedial measures to prevent any further damage from complications and side effects. So if you're a doctor and you know what you're doing, what you're looking for in terms of complications from remdesivir, as soon as you see signs of those complications, including data, from medical tests, then you go, okay, what do I do? Do I either reduce the dosage or do I just stop administering remdesivir altogether? Okay, let's say we stop administering remdesivir. What's the next thing I have to do? Now I have to immediately properly treat the complications. Because if you don't treat complications like kidney injury, liver injury, heart injury, then they may get worse and cause your patient more damage. And you don't want your patient to have liver problems, kidney problems. In other words, this is our body's filtration system to filter out toxins, filter out our blood. And if our filtration system isn't working, that's not going to help us overcome a severe upper respiratory tract infection like COVID-19, or a severe case of the flu for that matter. So if the doctor didn't properly monitor, chances are he didn't immediately take all the necessary remedial measures by either reducing the dosage or discontinuing the drug. And then he probably didn't immediately start to treat the side effects properly. Because if the doctor doesn't understand that, for instance, fluid buildup in the lungs is caused by remdesivir, then he's not going to properly treat it, right? He's going to think it's caused by something else, I said, by fluid intake. If the doctor doesn't understand that the kidney damage is being caused by remdesivir, and he didn't even catch it, well, he's not going to treat that right away as well, or liver damage. So let's get those records and let's gather the evidence. Now, all of you are going to ask, well, wait a minute. There were laws passed in many states including federal laws, that protect physicians and medical facilities from COVID-19 related claims for medical malpractice, negligence. And also, uh, drug manufacturers, when they're given emergency authorization, can also be protected from claims for product liability. My approach is as follows. Given what was happening and all the horror stories that my law office has heard and other attorneys that I work with about people being lied to when they were given remdesivir, about all the financial incentives to hospitals for administering remdesivir, when patients were put on ventilators, when patients were transferred to intensive care units, when patients were put on ECMO machines, people suspect conspiracies. In other words, group conduct in illegal activity, right? And some of these things may not be covered by all these immunities that were provided by the law. You just have to build up sufficient evidence, right? Both documentary evidence, witness testimony, and statistical evidence. And then let's see what happens. Now, if the physicians involved and the medical facilities involved, because we also have an issue of when when hospital management who are not physicians start telling their doctors how they should treat COVID-19 patients, as far as I'm concerned, that's illegal practice of medicine, right? Think of it. Non-doctors, just lay hospital management are telling physicians on how they should treat their patients with remdesivir or putting people on ventilators without providing them immediately antibiotics to prevent ventilator-acquired pneumonia or other things, right? Things that work. You may have an issue with illegal practice of medicine. You may have an issue with, people conspiring to obtain additional funds. So let's get the evidence nationwide. We're getting it worldwide anyway from other countries where the same thing has happened, right? The U.S. is not the only country this has happened to. And let's see whether we can go after these people. And if the physicians in the hospitals keep on telling us, well, it's the federal government that told us what protocols we should use to treat COVID-19, the National Institutes of Health, Dr. Fauci or the Centers for Disease Control, well, then we may have an issue with our federal government. And eventually, but this may be a political decision, we may have to assert claims against our federal government for any injuries that we've suffered from these federally, mandated or recommended treatment protocols or prohibitions on early treatment by repurposed drugs like hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin that were effective, or even the mental health drug fluoxetine, also very effective from what I understand. Do your own research. So we may have a claim against the federal government, but that's a political issue, right? But we'll get to that. What we need to do right now is all of us gather the evidence. Get us your medical records, get us your pharmacy printouts. We also ask for that versus the pharmacy printouts, the medical records, and the health insurance statements for 3 years. Because often when it comes to product liability claims or medical malpractice claims, the defendants will play the blame game. They'll say, well, the wrongful death wasn't caused by our drug. The plaintiff's death wasn't caused by our drug. It's caused by a pre-existing medical condition. Or the medical malpractice didn't really injure the patient. It was his other medical conditions or other drugs that he was on. This is where we'd like to see the full picture, surrounding the patient's health. Hopefully, within 3 years before the patient started receiving treatment for COVID-19 was hospitalized for. So that's what we need to do to try to get justice for the injured and for the deceased. Don't give up. Call my law office, and we'll explain to you how we can represent you. We represent claimants on product liability claims product liability claims, including dangerous drugs and medical malpractice claims nationwide. In other words, in all the states with local co-counsel. That's the goal. That's the trick. That's the effective means of working with local co-counsel. in all the states who know the local judges, who know the local court system, who know the local medical malpractice precedent, cases, statutory law, and court procedures. Because those are the guys who will effectively represent our clients in local court proceedings once we're able to get to those and overcome some of the complications, including the legislative get out of jail card laws that were passed. That's about it. Again, it's my sincere belief that 90% of COVID-19 related deaths were avoidable if people were given early treatment, if people were given a proper treatment once they were admitted to hospitals with known effective drugs, known safe and effective drugs that have been used for many years to treat other conditions and proved to be effective to treat COVID-19 through various mechanisms. The last thing that I want to discuss is, let's not forget, and I honestly suspect this, based on my information and belief, that COVID-19 was a lab manufactured virus. That was part of gain of function research. In other words, people were willing to open Pandora's box of taking lethal viruses, viruses that had 1, 2% lethality, and trying to make them more lethal with the rationalization that, we'll make this virus in the lab so we can develop proper ways to treat it, proper treatment methods, effective treatment methods, so we can also develop vaccines. That's a great way to do it, especially when you're creating chimera viruses. What I've been told, the spike protein isn't a protein that's regularly found on bat viruses, but apparently it's found on coronavirus and pangolins, different animal. So why are people talking about that this is a virus that somehow jumped from bats to humans? I've seen reports, I've seen studies, I've seen testimony under oath by scientists and physicians who are 100% convinced, who've shown DNA sequences, who've shown other tests that show that this is a man-made virus, with all sorts of other junk put in it to make it more lethal. If that's the case, then guess what? We may have claims against the federal government. We may have the claims against people who funded, who ordered this gain of function research, even if they did it through third parties or did it in other countries. Right? But if it came back home and it killed Americans at home, injured Americans at home, then our federal government and its agents should be responsible for it, including by having to pay compensation. We just have to build up enough evidence. And remember what I've said to you before. I'm sorry, my alarm is going off. If they get away with it once and we don't do anything about it, they'll get away with it again. So we have to make every effort to seek justice for the injured, for the deceased, and we have to make every effort as citizens to make sure that drug manufacturers, that physicians, that medical facilities, that are government agencies, including healthcare, including the Defense Department that does some, bioweapons research, and DARPA and all these other agencies, will never do this again. Right? Will never play gain of function research abroad, in labs abroad. Whether it's labs in China, whether it's labs in Ukraine, or in other countries, where apparent research like this is being conducted surreptitiously from the American public. Because if these things ever get released, either intentionally or accidentally, then people are going to die. And we need to make sure that these people understand what will happen to those responsible. And you do that by bringing people to justice, financially, and if necessary, from a criminal law point of view, if there's criminal conduct involved. That's about it. Again, I'm Greg Krasovsky. I'm an attorney, and I look forward to trying to help you get justice with COVID-19 and Remdesivir-related claims. Next video will be on COVID-19 vaccine claims for all the people who've been injured by COVID-19 vaccines. Thank you.